Conor McGregor is a UFC fighter. And one thing he did really well was transition all the eyeballs that watched him win or lose in the octagon in the UFC and transfer those over to eyeballs on products that he sold, whether it be his new brand of his new fight media that he came out with, or even his Scotch brand that he started. He was able to start up these brands, and because he had the attention, he was able to garner support of an audience who ended up buying from him, and then investors who would invest in him. And it all started with attention. And welcome back to the Money, the Mindset, and the Mentoring podcast. Today we have Jill Lublin on the show. We're talking about marketing. Specifically, what we're going to be talking about is PR, public relations, about getting you out there as a thought leader in your industry, getting recognized, getting known, and getting out there and doing stuff. So today, Jill, thank you very much for joining the show, and let's get into talking about marketing.
Thank you, Steve. Glad to be here.
Now, when we look at the word marketing, marketing is one of those all-encompassing words, and I know that a lot of people do get it wrong when they're talking about marketing, and specifically around PR. So I want to get you to set the facts straight, and what is public relations, what is there, so that people know the different words to use.
Well, first of all, public relations, I want to say, is happening to all of you right now. The minute you walk out the door or into a Zoom room or into the coffee shop or on the plane or frankly, wherever you go, guess what you're doing? Public relations. So let's just get clear about that. And I really want you to expand your mindset today about public relations, what it does and why it's so good for you. And then I want you to think of marketing like a tree. And the tree has different branches. One of them, very important one, is publicity. That's the branch we're talking about today.
Beautiful. And to focus specifically on it, why is it so important to focus on it right now? What is the driving reason why somebody should say, not tomorrow, not 2 weeks from now, but why should I start this today?
Yeah, great question. Because publicity is a gift that keeps on giving. And the point is that once you get it, it's like a momentum happens. And in fact, I like to say that publicity is like the 3 M's because it monetizes you, it magnifies you, and it multiplies you. And that really you get to show up in one place, give a message, and reach a lot more people than many of the marketing strategies that many of you are employing. So it's simple in its execution, and it brings you so much really good things, such as clients, leads, gets you paid, it gets you seen, and it gets you heard.
Now, it's so important when you look at marketing. I feel that, I've been working in sales and marketing, since the 90s. And one thing I think people get wrong in marketing is they don't actually measure it. They just kind of say, I'm just going to put something out to the ether and it's going to be great. ROI is something that I think is extremely important, and having KPIs, key performance indicators. What are some of the ones that you think are really important so people can calculate an ROI on publicity?
Yeah. And, it is important return on investment in anything you do in business. So one of the things in our industry, how we measure ROI is when you get your time in the media, in the sun, in your 15 minutes of fame or even more, because again, it's a gift that keeps on giving. It's braggability. By the way, braggability has good ROI. Let me just say that, because you can say I've been featured in wherever it is, and everything matters and everything counts. And then where you've been featured in, hey, if you would have paid for it in advertising, I want you to measure that. So for instance, one of my clients got a 1.5 pages in her local newspaper. A 1.5 pages would have cost her $50,000 in advertising. That, believe me, was not just sitting in her pocket. And then that 1.5 page really, it was publicity completely free. That resulted in 10 registrations for her class, in a 30% increase in her website visits. And then there's what I call atta girl, atta boy, because that's the braggability. People saw it in her community and started sending her, hey, great job. I saw you. That's recognition, which escalates and elevates your expertise. And she got 3 speaking engagements. Okay. That was just the start. That's what happened immediately. And then we start looking at, okay, take it in your portfolio, send it to a client before you engage with them. That keeps the media and, the whole media ROI going. Very powerful.
That's something that's, reason why I started my podcast in the very beginning. If we kind of take a look at it, the Money, the Mindset Mentoring podcast. When I started my podcast, my first thing was I just wanted to get something out, just anything.
Right.
I just needed to get moving on something. And then as I started working on it, it started developing new different options in front of me. And in the form of relationships of people that I got to know, and in the form of audience that I got to build. I mean, we're now at like 40,000 views a month on YouTube. That would never happen if I didn't start the journey and just said, I'm just going to get into doing it, not tomorrow, but today.
Love that. I love that. And I think that, Steve, you just said it really good. It's like you start today. Wherever you start, it's about baby steps. Look, I even keep a little baby step by my desk because it is about baby steps to success. And publicity is a baby step that really elevates you fast, because when you're seen and heard, wow, that's name recognition and that's ROI.
Absolutely. And everybody wants the results. But you have to be committed to the activities to get the results. And it does start off with the baby steps. Then it starts to walking. Then it comes to running. And then it goes to warp speed. But it has to start with those baby steps first. And you have to be recognizing the fact that sometimes you're going to fall like a baby does.
Yeah.
But each time you fall, you're going to learn. And it's going to be a small fall because you're short. But then afterwards, it's going to go to warp speed. And then you're going to be doing really well.
How did you know I was short?
like knows like. So when you start calculating, looking at the return that people are getting, what are, if we were going to look at specific metrics, and pick maybe one or two, what are some of those metrics that people need to put out there? What are some of the, if I had a dashboard and I were going to put in one or two things on my dashboard, what should some of those things be?
Well, specifically, how much would it have cost in advertising? Then I want you listen, I hear from people all the time. How many, let's say you self-publish a book. How many books did you sell? So I was sharing with you when we were talking before, one of my clients from a 15-minute podcast interview sold 42 books. Hey, where can you do that in 15 minutes? That's good. So you measure that. You measure like what I was talking about with my clients, workshop registrations, website stat visits. So increase in wherever you are, blog visits. You want to see where people are heading back to, and you definitely always want them to head back somewhere, right? And suggest that they continue on this journey with you. That's important, that you have something to leave them with. And I think that's a key indicator too. So those are some of the things I would look at, and what I've noticed in everyone I work with is immediately enhances their reputation, their credibility. And, don't underestimate braggability and visibility, because what happens is when somebody Googles you, and believe me, they will. So, for instance, one of my clients following my publicity system got into the Minneapolis Star Tribune. She got one line in the Minneapolis Star Tribune, walked into an interview where 3 other people were being interviewed at different times. And he looked up at her and he said, "Hey, I see that you were featured in the Minneapolis Star Tribune. And I want you to know you got the job because you must be good. You got media." Now that was above her competition where, some were even more experienced, but there's an assumption that happens when you get media. It completely elevates you quickly.
Robert Kiyosaki says a really good quote. Or not really good quote. Robert Kiyosaki says a really important thing. He says, he was asked the question once, do you want money, $1 million, or do you want 1 million followers?
Oh.
And he said, I want 1 million followers, because $1 million cash is trash. And I'm paraphrasing. 1 million followers. And why is that so important? Because intention is senior to revenue. Attention is senior to money. And so having that attention, it's the reason why The Rock, if The Rock decided to start, I don't know, a glass making company, he would be able to sell 1 million glasses. Why? Because he has attention. This is why, any of these celebrities who have celebrity status, if they're able to use that celebrity status in adjacent businesses. Think about George Foreman. Half the world knows George Foreman as a really good boxer. The other half of the world knows him as a really good chef because of the George Foreman grill. And some of the world, I guess, knows him for both. But the idea is he was able to use the attention that he has and leverage that with a product that he has that's adjacent. Yes. And so the attention becomes the most important thing because the money will follow it.
Yes, brilliant. I love that. And that's really a good understanding that, all of you should hopefully pay attention to the fact that there's a big reason why companies spend millions of dollars on publicity while why celebrities have to do literally 24 to 48 hour stints of celebrities of that kind of celebrity appearance after movies, after, you never see the music biz people leave media because media keeps generating attention.
Absolutely. Think about Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor is a UFC fighter. And one thing he did really well was transition all the eyeballs that watched him win or lose in the octagon in the UFC and transfer those over to eyeballs on products that he sold, whether it be his new brand of his new fight media that he came out with, or even his Scotch brand that he started. He was able to start up these brands, and because he had the attention, he was able to garner support of an audience who ended up buying from him, and then investors who would invest in him. And it all started with attention.
I love that. Thank you. Yes, so true.
Yeah. And so what can people do to start? I mean, the first thing people are like, that sounds great. Conor McGregor, The Rock, all these Mel Robbins, whoever you want to pick, Robert Kiyosaki, all these people have got a ton of attention. They're up there at that celebrity status. I've got maybe a couple hundred people on my Facebook page that, how do I start? What's the steps they take to get things going?
Yeah, and great place to start. And let me just tell you, all those celebrities started everywhere all of you are. They were unknown, unseen, nobody knew their name, and publicity is what drove it. When we're talking about entrepreneurs and small business owners, here's the great news. You take those baby steps and you immediately are ahead of your competition or co-opetition, whatever you like to call it. And the great news is because somebody can find you when they Google you, that's where we're going to get started. And that's really the place to get started, like Google Alerts. Google Alerts is a great place, a baby step to get started, which will immediately put your name in so that when you're in media, you're going to know about it. That's important. But what else Google Alerts does that's very powerful and people underestimate is I want you to put one word in. So for instance, I wrote the book Guerrilla Publicity. I put in the word publicity so that I know whenever media is writing any story on publicity, I'm going to get alerted to it. I know what's hot. I know what's going on. I know where the trends are. Same thing when I wrote my book, The Profit of Kindness. I put in one word, kindness. And you know what I found out? I found out that November 13th is World Kindness Day. Well, now we can start a whole leverage campaign toward November 13th and do it in the right way. So one of the things I want you to do is do that. And also think of your publicity campaign and you in general like a gardening process. And so 3, 6, 9, 12 months out, look ahead, create a plan. Like, is there a holiday that falls in your special time? Is there a calendar day that is your focus time, right? And get creative about it. So, hey, guess what? In February, it's also Random Acts of Kindness Day. And again, I wrote the book, The Profit of Kindness. Well, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to go out with an anti-random acts of kindness campaign. I'm going to say practice a conscious act of kindness campaign and just have fun with it. And I think this is a real key that, part of what we're doing here is having a little more levity and embrace what else is possible, what else you can talk about for your publicity.
I think there's definitely when it comes to publicity, and I know when I look at my podcast, recency and relevancy becomes something very interesting. So I like the idea of unpackaging that first little bit about the Google alerts, because if there's certain words or phrases that are important to your industry, knowing when they're being used and how they're being used is extremely important. In a mortgage business that I own, the Bank of Canada interest rate releases is an important thing. So knowing when those dates are and doing some work up to those dates so that you become recent and relevant and front of mind when those dates hit, because when people are searching, it's going to be on those days. When they're not searching, it's kind of going through else. What else are they looking for? So what are the things that you can search that are going to be important and use those key terms in the way that you come up as important?
Absolutely. And what's super wonderful about that is it enables you to plant your publicity garden. Because that's really what I want all of you doing, is planting your publicity garden and knowing that publicity evolves as you do. When you have new launches, new products, new books, new campaigns, you can create a whole new publicity focus. And Steve, there's something really wonderful that you can do that gives you an edge over most people, and that is to use everything you've got. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, being a woman, I can utilize International Women's Day, March 8th. Just talk about some women's issue. And maybe for women, it's harder to get themselves out there because, well, culturally, we haven't been as trained. I'll just say that. But, what an interesting thing to talk about on International Women's Day. Or my business consultant who has a son who's autistic. And I said to him, I bet you've got all kinds of things as a father to deal with, things as a business owner to deal with that perhaps others don't. He said, you're darn right. And so we went out for National Autism Month talking about being a father to a son who's autistic and how that supports or affects his business. So, there's other things you could be using. And I want you to get a little more creative, many of you, to look at how can you use all parts of who you are. If you're Hispanic, Hispanic Heritage Month. If you're Black, Black History Month. Like, let's start using all parts of who we are, our ethnicity, our religion, the outside, the inside, and really other parts of your life that could be interesting to help promote that would then drive people right back to you. That's the good news.
Well, I think that idea of looking at the adjacent things that you're doing in your life really creates an authenticity around yourself. It's not using
Exactly.
those things, because some people might think that this is disingenuous to use something like, autism to benefit your business. But what it's doing is it's doing the exact opposite.
That's
What it's
right.
allowing you to is to be authentically you, which is showing all the character elements that built you, the DNA of who you are today. It allows you to use those things to really be authentic rather than
And you know what
otherwise.
else? There are going to be people who are going to relate to you based on other parts of your story, based on who you are. Like, let's take the businesswoman I work with who's an expert in business communication. Okay. So we were doing great stories about how to communicate better in business, what to say and what not to say to be effective in communicating for sales, different pieces, right? And then Black History Month happens. And then before that, I said to her, let's shift your story now to how to be a powerful Black woman and communicate effectively in today's times. That's a different story that actually still has to do with everything she does, everything she teaches, uses everything she's got, and got her into Black Enterprise and Essence magazine. Now, let me tell you how powerful that is and how much she would have paid had she had to buy that advertising. Oh, no, it was all free. It was publicity. And what a powerful impact she had by showing up in those places and switching her story. You see where we're going with that?
Well, and I think the idea of switching their story is also the one thing we have to do as the person who's getting into publicity is to switch our narrative in our brain. And the way we switch the narrative in our brain is that the publicity engine has to churn 24/7. And so the publicity engine is always looking for content. And so if you're coming with content that is something that they find interesting, that you might have a different spin, a different angle, that these magazines are going to be looking for people where they can grab some authentic stories, because every day is another day they need content. It doesn't stop.
Well, right. Yes. And you got your TV stations, radio stations that have to be literally to the minute, always looking for content and great experts, right? Day by day. Then you've got, the magazines, newspapers, and blogs and podcasts, all the wonderful places that need experts just like you in, by the way, your local area, which I love local publicity because it helps you get seen and heard. It's usually affiliates of larger affiliates. So I say everything matters and everything counts in publicity. Just the most important part is to get started anywhere you can.
Absolutely. Massive action beats perfect planning every single day. Because when you're in action, you're actually learning as you're doing and you're seeing results, and that's feeding your success journey. When you're
Yes.
in the perfect planning, you're trying to conceive what it might be, and you'll never really see those things that you're actually going to see and be able to correct the things that you would actually be able to do as you're in action. So I always believe massive imperfect action beats perfect planning.
Amen. I love that.
Yeah. And so we're looking at I'm a person who's got a couple different things on the go. I want to get started. 1, 2, 3 things that somebody could do to kind of get into that moment of massive action. What is the
Okay,
first thing
so
they can do?
one we did Google Alerts. So go to Google
Yep.
Alerts. It's free. Put your name in. Put that phrase or one solid name. Like kindness. Okay, that's one. Two, go to nationaldaycalendar.com. Find 3 holidays. Just pick 3. Don't overthink it. Just pick 3. And if they're obvious to you, like for instance, I have a divorce coach and we picked Valentine's Day for how to fall out of love. And she also helped people raise their kids well, right? So how to fall out of love and still raise your kids well. So
Mm-hmm.
that was a great Valentine's story that worked the other way. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Cause not everybody, isn't falling in love in Valentine's Day. Some of them are falling out of love. So again, looking at how do we serve and thrive in a media environment that, has you talk to as many people as possible. And I think that those are really good things to do. And the other piece is these are PR antennas. I want you to keep your PR antennas up. So, every day, like look at your phone. That's where headlines are and news. So don't tell me you're not watching news, whatever, because everybody is, in fact, probably consuming more than they've ever consumed before. And it's on your phone, perhaps, or you might be consuming it in other ways. Look at headlines, watch for trends. Like, okay, what is happening that I could be talking about? For instance, I have a lot of mental health experts right now, people in transformational mindset areas, people who are coaches and work with people to have better lives. Well, we are living in a time where there is tremendous amount of, anxiety, mental health issues that came out of COVID. There's still people are dealing with physical health issues more than ever they have. All of that, if you're in any of those arenas, expand your mindset for, wow, I could be talking about this, fill in the blank.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for people to step back and not see themselves as, I do this, but here's the question. What are you an expert in? Not what do you do, but what are you an expert in? That's going to drive you to far more possibilities than just using what do you do?
Absolutely. I think most people don't buy for features, they buy for benefits.
Mm.
And so the idea that we're focusing more on what does somebody get because of what you do rather than what is it that you do, I think that's a way better way of focusing on the way that you communicate,
Yes.
let alone the way that that you write up your feature sheets or how you decide to spin your product. The idea
Yes.
is it's the impact of what you do. It's not
Yes.
the thing that you do.
Perfect.
Yeah. The other thing too that you mentioned earlier on is about the idea of getting out there and getting on podcasts. And I think, selfishly speaking, I think that is definitely something that I think people really need to do. The podcasts every day are producing episodes, and we always are looking for great guests to come on our show. For me, I'm always looking for people who are looking at scaling, people who are in high growth mode, and people who are really looking for key nuggets so that they can hit that ground running rather than trying to figure it out, as they go. What's your thoughts on people and being on guests on podcasts?
I love podcasts. Here we are, right? I mean, such a wonderful opportunity. There are many, many available, and people like Steve, who are hosts, need great guests, like you just said, right? To fill slots, to focus on certain issues. So get on podcasts. That is such a wonderful first step to take, that then you can practice your sound bites, get your message down, make sure that you flow smoothly and have good things to say, of course, which I know what you all do, because if you're watching this and listening, you are already an expert. You are already above the pack because you're into constant growth and education and learning, right? So immediately that tells me a lot about all of you watching. And I think that you got to understand that people want to hear what you have to say. Podcasts are a great place to do that.
Absolutely, they are. I think the podcast journey, what it really starts as, number one, you focus on being a guest so that you can get out there and practice your message. The next thing you start looking at is saying, well, how do I host my own show? Because once you start being a guest, you realize that you're sort of at the host's mercy. Hey, it is what it is. But when you start having your own show, then you start realizing you're actually, as you talk about planting those gardens, you're actually planting those gardens, and you own the digital real estate.
Yes.
And so the journey happens through there. And then the next natural thing happens is you start getting on stages,
Yes.
and you start getting out there and talking at different conferences, which I know for me, my conference journey really started once I started hosting my own show, because I started getting asked to be speaking at conferences rather than asking to speak at conferences.
Yes. And it's an elevation of your status immediately. That's what media does, whether you're the host or the guest. The truth is your status elevated immediately using public relations. That's the key point.
Absolutely. And the thing is what most people don't realize is that the change that's happening right now in PR is a migration from the corporate brand back to the personal brand. The personal brand, when we look at the younger generations, the millennials, the X, the Ys, and the Zs, and the alphas, they all grew up with social media. And social media, the way to be successful in social media was never through having Coca-Cola or GM or any of these major brands. It was around the individual brands because it was a social media. So the influencer style personal brand is becoming even more important now than it ever was.
Yes, beautiful. So true. And the reality is people are making decisions on who you are, and the trust factor that publicity gives you, because they see your energy, they see who you are, how you speak, what you know, your smarts, right? All that is seen and heard, and people are making decisions on that. And now more than ever, that trust factor is huge. So getting in front of people is key. Publicity does that. It gets you seen, gets you heard, and gets you paid. That's the great part about it.
Absolutely. I think when people get it wrong, they think about it as social proofing. I think what you're saying, it's about building trust, which is taking that to the next level. Social proofing is kind of a stopgap. It's a defense mechanism. Go on the offense. Go out and build trust. And I think if you take that as a journey, you're going to find a lot of success in the things like building knowledge, in building trust, and of course, building revenue.
Yeah, and expert authority, period. As soon as you get expert authority with earned media, this is earned, right? Because it shows that the media says yes to you, and that, you have to say yes to the media. That's publicity.
Absolutely. Now, if somebody also wants to hall pass it to the front of the line and not search it for themselves, the best way for them to do is to go to the publicitycrashcourse.com/free gift. And this way you can connect with Jill Lublin to really get a handle on what needs to be done so that you don't have to go to 15, 20 different websites, take 18 different courses, and try to figure it all out for yourself. You can go and just immediately get started with Jill Lublin and figure out how to get your PR journey on the go. Now, Jill, if there's one final thought you could leave with the audience, what would that be? What's one last thing that you want to tell them that we haven't talked about that is the most important thing that they need to know going into this journey?
Oh, there are so many, but one of the things I want to say is your message matters. Your message matters. This is not a wait game, my friends. This is go where you are right now. Do what you can right now with who you are. It's perfect. PR is an evolutionary game. Like I said before, you're planting your garden, you're planting your seeds. So let's plant some seeds so that beautiful garden grows and that your message can have impact and influence right now.
Beautiful. I love it. And guys, just thank you, Jill, for being a part of our show. And guys, this is the money. This is the mindset. This is the mentoring podcast. We'll see you on the next one.